There's something hauntingly powerful about standing in a place where time itself feels altered, where the air is thick with the weight of centuries, and the very stones seem to whisper secrets of the past. Picture this: you're deep inside an ancient temple, your footsteps echoing against walls carved with symbols no one alive today can fully decipher. The light filters through narrow openings, casting long shadows that dance like spirits of those who once gathered here. This isn't just a ruin, it's a portal, a place where entire civilizations came to mark the end of one era and the birth of another, where rituals were performed to bridge the gap between the known and the unknown. These sacred spaces weren't merely backdrops for ceremony, they were the beating heart of human transformation, designed to channel the collective awe, fear, and hope of societies facing the unknown. From the towering pyramids of Mesoamerica to the enigmatic circles of Stonehenge, these ritual sites share an eerie common thread. They were built to confront the most profound questions of existence. What happens when an age ends? How do we navigate the chaos of change? The answers lie in the way these cultures inscribed their beliefs into stone, aligning their temples with the stars, the solstices, and the rhythms of the cosmos. Take Teotihuacan, for example, the so-called City of the Gods. Its massive pyramids and sprawling plazas weren't just architectural marvels, they were a cosmic clock, a physical manifestation of humanity's attempt to make sense of time's relentless march. And then there's Göbekli Tepe, a site so ancient it predates agriculture itself, where pillars carved with mysterious beasts suggest rituals that might have shaped the very dawn of civilization. What if these places hold clues not just about the past, but about us, about how we, too, seek meaning in moments of upheaval? Today, we're stepping inside these ritual spaces to unravel how civilizations turned fear into ceremony, uncertainty into order. We'll explore how stones became calendars, how temples became time machines, and how the act of marking an era's end was, in itself, an act of defiance, a way to declare that even in the face of the unknown, humanity could leave a mark that would echo across millennia. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a journey into the minds of those who dared to build monuments to eternity. So let's walk these ancient paths together and discover what they can teach us about endings, beginnings, and the timeless human need to make sense of the universe. These ritual spaces were far more than just monuments. They were cosmic maps, carefully constructed to mirror the universe as ancient civilizations understood it. Think of the Great Pyramid of Giza, its precise alignment with the stars acting like a giant stone compass pointing to the heavens, or the Mayan city of Chichen Itza, where the shadow of the serpent god Kukulcan slithers down the pyramid steps during the equinox, a breathtaking display of celestial choreography. These weren't accidents of architecture, they were deliberate acts of alignment, a way to tether human experience to the grand cycles of the cosmos. What's fascinating is how these spaces functioned as both clock and compass, measuring time while also guiding spiritual journeys. The Egyptians oriented their temples along the Nile's flood patterns, tying their rituals to the life-giving pulse of the river. The builders of Stonehenge positioned its massive stones to frame the sunrise on the summer solstice, transforming a barren plain into a sacred stage for the sun's annual rebirth. Even the positioning of doorways, chambers, and altars held meaning. Every angle and corridor was a silent language, speaking of renewal, endings, and the eternal return of cosmic order. But perhaps the most striking thing about these spaces is how they turned uncertainty into ceremony. When an era ended, whether marked by a dying king, a fading dynasty, or a celestial omen, these weren't moments of panic, but of profound ritual. The Aztecs held their new fire ceremony once every 52 years, extinguishing every flame in the empire before rekindling them from a single sacred source, symbolizing the rebirth of time itself. In Egypt, the pharaoh's death wasn't just an end, it was a carefully scripted transition, a journey through the underworld mapped out in the very walls of his tomb. These civilizations didn't just passively observe the passage of time, they engaged with it, shaping it through ritual to assert control over the chaos of change. The stones they raised, the temples they built, were declarations in rock and mortar that even when eras crumble, human meaning endures. Walking through these spaces today, we're not just seeing ruins, we're stepping into the minds of people who dared to build eternity into the landscape. Stonehenge rises from the English countryside like a riddle written in stone, its purpose echoing across 4,000 years. Those massive sarsen blocks weren't just dragged here for show, they were placed with impossible precision, each one a cog in a vast celestial machine. Picture the longest day of the year when dawn breaks over the heel stone and sunlight comes pouring through the monument's heart like liquid gold. For the Neolithic people who built it, this wasn't just a pretty sunrise, it was the universe itself nodding in approval, a cosmic green light to begin harvest rituals or initiate new leaders. But Stonehenge's genius lies in its layers of meaning. The outer circle tracks the moon's 18.6-year cycle, while the inner horseshoe of trilithons frames the winter solstice sunset, a reminder that even as one year dies, another is already stirring. Archaeologists have found evidence of feasts held here, with animal bones and pottery shards suggesting gatherings that drew people from across Britain. Imagine the scene, fires flickering against the stones, chants rising into the night sky, as entire communities came together to acknowledge time's turning. This wasn't just astronomy, it was theater where the players were the sun, the moon, and the very fabric of existence. And then there are the Aubrey holes, those mysterious pits encircling the site. Some scholars believe they held wooden posts or even human remains, turning Stonehenge into a bridge between the living and the dead. During an eclipse, when the moon's shadow swallowed the sun, perhaps these holes became portals, places where priests could commune with ancestors to seek guidance as one age ended and another began. The recent discovery of a nearby Superhenge at Durrington Walls with its own solstice alignment suggests these people didn't just mark time, they orchestrated it, using multiple monuments like gears in a spiritual clockwork. What's haunting is how Stonehenge's builders encoded their worldview into every stone. The blue stones, hauled over 200 miles from Wales, weren't chosen at random. Their distinctive spotted dolerite was believed to hold healing properties, linking earthly renewal to cosmic cycles. Even the avenue leading to the site follows the path of the midsummer sunrise, turning a simple walk into a pilgrimage through time itself. In a world without written records, these stones were their library, their church, their way of saying, "We were here and we understood." Standing among them today, you can almost hear the whispers of those who once watched the same sky, searching for meaning in the stars as their own era slipped silently into the past. Teotihuacan sprawls across the valley like a stone hymn to time itself, its pyramids and plazas arranged with such deliberate precision that walking its streets feels like traversing a celestial map. At its center, the Pyramid of the Sun doesn't just dominate the skyline, it measures it, its base aligned almost perfectly with the points where the sun sets on key dates of the agricultural calendar. But this isn't just a giant sundial, it's the heart of a city designed to enact the rebirth of time. Every structure here whispers of a civilization that saw endings not as finality, but as necessary pauses before renewal. Take the Ciudadela, the vast sunken plaza flanked by temples. archaeologists found evidence of a ritual unlike anything else in Mesoamerica: the deliberate burning and dismantling of entire buildings, not by invaders, but by the city's own people. Layers of ash and shattered murals suggest these weren't acts of destruction. They were sacred performances, like a phoenix reducing itself to embers so it could rise again. Imagine the spectacle: towering temples set ablaze under a star-filled sky, priests chanting as flames consumed the old world to make way for the new. The city's very layout reinforces this obsession with cycles. The Street of the Dead, Teotihuacan's central artery, doesn't run straight. It angles precisely 15.5 degrees east of true north, mirroring the path of the Pleiades star cluster. To the people who built this place, that celestial alignment wasn't just symbolic. It was a lifeline, tethering their world to the eternal rhythms of the cosmos. Even the Pyramid of the Moon, with its 7 tiers echoing the layers of the underworld, served as a stage for ceremonies where time was quite literally renegotiated. Recent excavations revealed something even more astonishing. Beneath the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent lies a tunnel filled with liquid mercury and miniature mountains of jade. This wasn't a treasure hoard. It was a meticulously crafted underworld, a physical manifestation of the cyclical journey from death to rebirth. The mercury's shimmering surface may have represented a sacred river, while the jade stood for the fertile earth awaiting renewal. What's striking is how Teotihuacan's rituals blur the line between architecture and performance. The city itself was the stage, and its people weren't just actors. They were co-creators of time's great wheel. When they painted their temples with vibrant murals of storm gods and flowering serpents, when they buried their dead with mirrors to reflect the stars, they weren't decorating. They were participating, using every stone and symbol to ensure that when one era ended, another would inevitably begin. Standing atop the Pyramid of the Sun at dawn, as the first light spills over the surrounding mountains, you can almost feel the weight of that ancient promise pressing against your skin. This skyline wasn't built to impress. It was built to persist, to outlast kings and calendars, to whisper across centuries that endings are only beginnings in disguise. Göbekli Tepe shatters everything we thought we knew about the birth of civilization. This sprawling complex in southeastern Turkey, dating back nearly 12,000 years, stands as a silent revolution, a temple built not by farmers or kings, but by hunter-gatherers who hadn't yet discovered the plow. Its massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing over 16 tons, rise from the earth like sentinels from a forgotten age, each one carved with leaping foxes, coiled snakes, and prowling lions so vivid they seem to breathe across the millennia. What makes this place extraordinary isn't just its age, predating Stonehenge by 6,000 years, the pyramids by 7, but what it represents: a cultural Big Bang. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were nomads following herds across the grasslands. Yet they came together to haul these colossal stones, arranging them in perfect circles, as if trying to pin down the chaos of their changing world. The carvings tell a story. These aren't just animals, they're symbols, a visual language speaking of power, danger, and perhaps even gods. The vultures circling above pillar tops, their wings outstretched, might hint at sky burials, a ritual farewell to the old ways as a new era dawned. Archaeologists found something even more startling beneath the floors: intentionally buried layers. Entire sections of the site were meticulously filled in with rubble, as if sealing away one chapter before beginning another. This wasn't abandonment, it was ceremonial closure, like turning the page of a sacred book. And here's the twist: the oldest layers at Göbekli Tepe are the most sophisticated, suggesting its builders didn't evolve toward complexity, they began with it. Theories swirl around why hunter-gatherers would invest such effort in a ritual space. Some believe it was a communal hub where scattered bands gathered for ceremonies, forging alliances that eventually led to settled life. Others point to the site's alignment with the stars, particularly the constellation Orion, hinting at celestial events that may have triggered societal shifts. But the most compelling clue lies in the land itself. Within centuries of Göbekli Tepe's construction, the first domesticated wheat appears nearby, as if the rituals performed here planted the idea of agriculture itself. Standing among these pillars, you can almost hear the echoes of a pivotal moment in human history. This wasn't just a temple, it was a threshold. The animal carvings, the buried circles, the sheer scale of communal labor. They all whisper of a people standing at the edge of the unknown, using stone and symbol to navigate their way into a new world. Göbekli Tepe doesn't just challenge our timeline of civilization. It rewrites the story of how we became who we are, proving that sometimes the most profound revolutions begin not with tools but with belief. The temples of Karnak and Luxor rise from the Nile's banks like stone hymns to eternity, their columns and courtyards arranged not just for grandeur, but as precise instruments to measure the heavens. Walk the axis of Karnak's great hypostyle hall at dawn during the winter solstice, and you'll witness sunlight slicing perfectly down its central corridor, a beam of gold illuminating the inner sanctum where only the high priest could tread. This wasn't theatrical spectacle, it was celestial engineering. The Egyptians didn't just observe the stars, they choreographed their sacred spaces to dance with them. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, held particular power, its heliacal rising the moment it first reappeared after 70 days hidden by the sun's glare, coincided with the Nile's annual flood. To the Egyptians, this wasn't chance, it was divine synchronicity. Temples like Luxor were aligned so that on this critical night, priests watching from specific vantage points would see Sirius emerge directly over the sanctuary's apex, signaling the start of a new agricultural cycle. The entire ritual calendar revolved around these celestial handshakes where architecture and astronomy became one. But these alignments served a deeper purpose, maintaining the delicate balance of cosmic order. When an era ended marked by a pharaoh's death or the completion of a star cycle, the temples became stages for rituals of renewal. The Opet festival, celebrated annually at Luxor, saw statues of the gods carried along a processional route lined with sphinxes, their journey mirroring the sun's path across the sky. As priests chanted and incense swirled, they weren't just honoring deities, they were reknitting time itself, ensuring the universe wouldn't unravel into chaos. Recent discoveries reveal even more sophistication. The Temple of Dendera, with its famous zodiac ceiling, contains hidden corridors that funneled moonlight onto specific hieroglyphs during lunar eclipses, turning the entire building into a kind of cosmic switchboard. At Edfu, the alignment of the pylon gates creates a perfect frame for the constellation Orion during the winter solstice, linking earthly rituals to Osiris, god of resurrection, whose soul was believed to dwell in those very stars. What's profound is how these temples blurred the line between monument and machine. The column capitals shaped like lotus buds weren't mere decoration. They symbolized the primeval mound of creation, emerging from cosmic waters each time the calendar reset. Even the temple floors sloped deliberately, allowing ritual fluids to flow in sacred patterns during ceremonies. Every stone was a cog in a vast mechanism designed not just to mark time, but to negotiate with it. Standing in Karnak's shadow at dusk as the first stars pierce the twilight, you can almost hear the echoes of those ancient priests. Their ceremonies weren't about predicting the future, they were about participating in it, using stone and star to ensure that when one age closed, another would begin with mat intact. In a world where time was both enemy and ally, these temples were humanity's boldest reply, not passive witnesses to eternity, but active shapers of it. The Parthenon stands atop the Acropolis like a marble manifesto, its honey-colored columns glowing against the Attic sky. But look closer, this isn't just a temple to Athena or a trophy of Athenian dominance. Every curve of its architecture, every figure in its frieze, pulses with the heartbeat of a city determined to rewrite its destiny. After the ashes of the Persian Wars, when Xerxes' armies reduced Athens to smoking rubble, this structure became the ultimate act of defiance, not just rebuilding, but reimagining what a civilization could be. The genius of the Parthenon lies in its paradoxes, its perfect proportions. The subtle curvature of the stylobate, the slight bulge of the columns, create an illusion of flawless symmetry, yet no two elements are identical. This wasn't just architectural brilliance, it was a metaphor. Athens had emerged from destruction not by erasing its scars, but by transforming them into artistry. The famous metopes lining the exterior tell the story: centaurs battling lapiths, gods overthrowing giants, mythic struggles mirroring the city's own fight for survival. Even the pediment sculptures, now tragically fragmented, showed Athena's birth alongside Poseidon's contest for patronage, framing the temple as both beginning and resolution. What's often overlooked is how the Parthenon functioned as a ritual calendar. The Panathenaic procession, depicted in the continuous frieze winding around the cella walls, wasn't merely decoration. Every 4 years, this relief came to life as thousands wound their way up the Acropolis, bearing a new peplos for Athena's statue. The timing coincided with the Great Panathenaea falling during Hecatombeon, the first month of the Athenian year, when the star Sirius rose to signal the flooding of the Nile. In linking their civic ritual to Egypt's agricultural cycle, the Athenians weren't just celebrating, they were anchoring their rebirth to the cosmos itself. The temple's orientation holds another clue. Unlike most Greek temples facing east, the Parthenon skews slightly northward, aligning with the rising of the Pleiades during the festival season. This celestial nod transformed the building into a cosmic clock, its shadows marking not just hours but epochs. When Pericles proclaimed Athens the school of Hellas from its steps, he was standing inside a machine for measuring cultural renaissance. Recent studies reveal even deeper layers. The colossal gold and ivory statue of Athena Parthenos inside wasn't merely a devotional object. Its base supposedly contained relics from Athens' mythical past, including a supposed fragment of the Palladium. This made the temple a reliquary of collective memory, where every victory and sacrifice could be ritually revisited. The Elgin marble's controversy often overshadows a profound truth. These carvings weren't just art. They were scripture in stone, a narrative toolkit for teaching citizens how to navigate the end of one age and the birth of another. Standing in the Parthenon's ruins today, you're not just seeing a monument to lost glory. You're witnessing the blueprint of a civilization that turned trauma into transcendence. When the morning sun catches the Pentelic marble just so, illuminating traces of original paint, azure, crimson, gold, it's as if the stones themselves whisper the same lesson they taught 2 millennia ago: destruction is never the end. It's the raw material for reinvention. Chichen Itza's El Castillo pyramid doesn't just dominate the Yucatan jungle, it converses with the cosmos. On the spring and fall equinoxes, as the sun dips toward the horizon, a mesmerizing spectacle unfolds. Shadows slither down the pyramid's northern staircase, forming the undulating body of Kukulcan, the feathered serpent god. This isn't just an optical illusion. It's a meticulously engineered moment where architecture becomes prophecy and stone transforms into a harbinger of change. The Mayans didn't just build monuments, they encoded their understanding of time's rhythm into every step, every angle, turning the pyramid into a celestial clock ticking toward renewal. The serpent's descent is more than a visual marvel, it's a symbolic bridge between worlds. Kukulcan, associated with both the sky and the underworld, represented the fluidity of time itself. For the Mayans, the end of a cycle wasn't a catastrophe. It was a necessary transition, like the shedding of a serpent's skin. Their long count calendar, with its much debated end date in 2012, wasn't predicting doom but marking the completion of a grand cycle, a cosmic reset. Rituals performed at Chichen Itza during these transitions weren't acts of fear. They were rehearsals for rebirth, ensuring the world would continue spinning into the next era. But the genius of El Castillo extends beyond the equinox. The pyramid's 4 sides each boast 91 steps, totaling 364, with the platform at the top serving as the final step, completing the solar year. Clap your hands at its base, and the acoustics produce an echo mimicking the chirp of the Quetzal bird, a sacred creature linked to the heavens. Even the pyramid's orientation aligns with the rising of Venus, a planet central to Mayan cosmology, its appearances meticulously tracked as omens of change. Beneath the pyramid lies a hidden cenote, a water-filled sinkhole considered a portal to the underworld. Recent explorations revealed offerings of jade, gold, and even human remains, not sacrifices in the sense of violence, but gifts to sustain the cosmic order. The Mayans saw these rituals as collaborations with the universe, a way to participate in time's eternal loop rather than merely endure it. Standing in the shadow of El Castillo today, you're not just witnessing ancient engineering. You're stepping into a mindset that viewed endings as invitations. The Mayans didn't fear the collapse of cycles, they celebrated them, trusting that every descent of the serpent meant another chance to rise. Angkor Wat rises from the Cambodian jungle like a stone hymn to the cosmos, its 5 central towers piercing the sky like the peaks of Mount Meru, the sacred axis around which Hindu mythology says the entire universe revolves. But this isn't just an architectural homage to legend. It's a meticulously engineered portal between earth and heaven. Every inch of its sprawling design, from the precise alignment of its galleries to the intricate carvings adorning its walls, was crafted to mirror the celestial order. Walk its causeways at dawn during the spring equinox, and you'll witness the sun rising directly over the central tower, casting the entire complex into perfect symmetrical balance. For the Khmer people, this wasn't just a pretty coincidence. It was proof that their king, their temple, and their empire stood at the very center of cosmic harmony. The temple's bas-reliefs tell a story far grander than mere decoration. Stretching for nearly 2,000 feet, these carvings depict the churning of the ocean of milk, a pivotal Hindu myth where gods and demons work together to stir the cosmic sea, extracting the elixir of immortality. This wasn't just art, it was a ritual blueprint. Scholars believe these scenes guided actual ceremonies performed during times of transition, when a king died or a dynasty faltered, reenacting this primordial struggle to reaffirm the world's balance. The temple's moat, representing that mythical ocean, turned the entire site into a stage where human rulers could symbolically participate in divine renewal. What's astonishing is how Angkor Wat's design evolved with the empire's spiritual shifts. Originally dedicated to Vishnu, the preserver god, it later transformed into a Buddhist site without losing its cosmic significance. The addition of Buddha statues in its galleries and the reorientation of its rituals show how the Khmer adapted their sacred space to reflect changing beliefs, proof that even in upheaval, the need to mark time's passage remained constant. The temple's westward orientation, unusual for Hindu structures, might hint at this fluidity, aligning not just with solstice sunsets but with funerary symbolism, suggesting the complex served as both coronation stage and eternal resting place for god-kings. Recent LiDAR scans reveal even deeper layers. Beneath the visible structures lie networks of buried towers and hidden courtyards, arranged in fractal patterns that mimic the cosmos's nested order. The central tower isn't just Mount Meru's symbol, it's the linchpin of an entire landscape engineered to mirror the heavens. Even the reservoir system surrounding Angkor, once dismissed as mere irrigation, is now understood as part of this grand design, with canals positioned to reflect specific constellations during monsoon rituals. Standing in Angkor Wat's shadow at sunset, as the last light gilds its lotus bud towers, you can almost hear the echoes of priests chanting, drums beating, and crowds witnessing the sacred theater of renewal. This wasn't just a monument to power, it was a machine for transcending time where stone and ceremony conspired to turn endings into beginnings. The Khmer didn't just build a temple, they built a universe in miniature, guaranteeing that no matter how many eras passed, their world would always find its way back to center. The ziggurates of Mesopotamia pierced the sky like staircases carved by giants' massive, tiered towers where priests climbed daily to whisper humanity's fears and hopes to the gods. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt, these weren't tombs, they were cosmic switchboards, their heights humming with the energy of divine negotiation. Each level represented a step closer to the heavens, with the summit reserved for rituals so potent they could alter fate itself. When drought cracked the earth or invaders massed at the city gates, it was here that priests performed ceremonies to sway the wills of capricious deities like Enlil or Ishtar, offering everything from golden statues to the smoke of sacrificial lambs. At the heart of this spiritual machinery was the Akitu festival, a 12-day spectacle marking the Mesopotamian New Year. Imagine the scene, the king, stripped of his regalia, kneeling before the statue of Marduk in the Esagila temple while priests recited the Enuma Elish, the epic of creation. This wasn't just pageantry, it was a ritual dismantling of the old order. The king's symbolic humiliation and subsequent reinstatement mirrored the mythic battle between Marduk and the chaos monster Tiamat, reenacting the universe's rebirth. By enduring this ordeal, the ruler proved his worthiness to steward the next cycle of time, turning political transition into a sacred act of cosmic housekeeping. What's striking is how these rituals turned architecture into theology. The ziggurate's very design, its 7 tiers echoing the 7 heavens, its orientation aligned with celestial movements, made it a physical manifesto of Mesopotamian beliefs. The Etemenanke ziggurate in Babylon, possibly the inspiration for the Tower of Babel legend, wasn't just tall, it was a ladder. Each brick bore the imprint of the king's name, binding his reign to the structure's permanence. When scribes wrote of the gods descending to earth, they meant it literally. These towers were landing pads for divine intervention. Archaeological evidence reveals even darker layers. Tablets from describe the substitution king ritual, where a false ruler was enthroned during celestial omens, only to be executed when danger passed, his death averting disaster from the true monarch. This macabre practice shows how deeply Mesopotamians believed their fates were woven into the fabric of the cosmos, that maintaining era-to-era continuity sometimes required blood as mortar between the stones of time. Yet for all their solemnity, these ceremonies crackled with life. The Akitu festival included processions where statues of gods traveled by barge along the Euphrates, crowds cheering as if the deities themselves were neighbors dropping by for the new year. The ziggurate's base bustled with merchants selling amulets, poets reciting hymns, and farmers seeking blessings for the coming harvest. Even in their moments of highest solemnity, the Mesopotamians understood eternity wasn't just sustained by grand gestures, but by the collective heartbeat of a society determined to keep the world turning. Standing in the shadow of a ziggurate's ruins today, you're not just looking at a crumbled stairway. You're seeing the blueprint of a civilization that refused to accept chaos as inevitable. that built towers not just of clay and bitumen, but of faith in humanity's power to negotiate with time itself. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the mountain winds carry whispers from both earth and sky, the temple of Apollo at Delphi hummed with a power unlike any other place in ancient Greece. This wasn't just a shrine, it was the beating heart of the Greek world's spiritual nervous system, a place where the veil between the present and the future grew thin. At its center sat the Pythia, the oracle who served as the god's mouthpiece, her trance-induced prophecies guiding entire civilizations through their most defining crossroads. When Croesus of Lydia asked whether he should wage war against Persia, when Athenian leaders sought wisdom before rebuilding their city after the Persian Wars, even when ordinary citizens faced impossible choices, they all climbed the sacred way to Delphi, desperate for a glimpse beyond time's curtain. The rituals here were as precise as they were mysterious. The Pythia, always a local woman over 50 chosen for her piety, would descend into the temple's inner sanctum, the Aditon, where fissures in the earth leaked ethylene gas, a sweet-smelling vapor modern science now knows can induce altered states of consciousness. Seated on a bronze tripod above this sacred crack, she'd chew laurel leaves, sip from the Castalian spring, and breathe deep the intoxicating fumes. As her body trembled and her voice contorted into guttural cries, priests would translate her fragmented utterances into hexameter verse, delivering prophecies famous for their cunning ambiguity. If you cross the Halys River, a great empire will fall. She told Croesus failing to specify it would be his, but Delphi's true power lay in its timing. The oracle only spoke on the 7th day of each month, Apollo's sacred number, aligning her prophecies with celestial rhythms. Pilgrims had to first purify themselves in the Castalia waters and offer sacrifices, a goat sprinkled with cold water. If it shivered, the day was auspicious. This wasn't superstition, it was cosmic choreography, ensuring every prophecy emerged at the exact moment the universe was most receptive. Even the temple's design played a role. Its orientation captured the first rays of the summer solstice sunrise, bathing the omphalos, the navel-shaped stone marking Delphi as the world's center, in golden light. What's often overlooked is how Delphi functioned as a psychological pivot point for entire eras. When the Athenians, reeling from Persian invasion, asked how to defend their city, the Pythia's famous reply, "Trust in your wooden walls," was interpreted as divine endorsement to build a navy. That fleet would later defeat the Persians at Salamis, birthing Athens' golden age. Similarly, Spartan kings consulted Delphi before major campaigns, weaving the oracle's words into their military strategies. These weren't just predictions, they were catalysts transforming uncertainty into action with the weight of divine sanction. Archaeological evidence reveals another layer. Delphi was a living archive of humanity's crossroads. The temple complex overflowed with stelae recording prophecies, treaties, and even manumission agreements where slaves were freed in Apollo's name. The treasuries lining the sacred way, built by city-states to house offerings, functioned like geopolitical scoreboards, their grandeur reflecting which powers were ascendant. When the Phocians plundered Delphi's riches in the 4th century BCE, it wasn't mere theft. It was an attempt to hijack the future itself. Standing among Delphi's ruins today, where the mountain air still carries the scent of wild oregano and ancient stone, you can almost hear the echoes of questions asked millennia ago. The Pythia's voice may be silent, but the lesson remains. In times of transition, humans have always sought spaces where the boundaries of time feel permeable. Delphi wasn't just a place to hear the future, it was where civilizations went to negotiate with it, armed with nothing but faith and the courage to step into the unknown. The Norse burial mounds rise from Scandinavian landscapes like silent sentinels between worlds' earthly portals where the boundaries of life, death, and time itself seemed to dissolve. When a Viking chieftain or king died, his people didn't just bury him. They orchestrated a cosmic handoff, turning grief into a ritual of renewal. Picture the scene: a mighty longship dragged ashore, its hull packed with swords, drinking horns, and even sacrificed animals, or sometimes loyal servants who chose to accompany their lord into the next life. As flames consumed the vessel, sending smoke curling into the northern sky, the crowd's chants weren't just farewells. They were incantations, willing the leader's journey to become a bridge for the entire community's survival. These ship burials functioned as more than tombs. They were metaphysical engines. The mound constructed over the ashes wasn't arbitrary. Its shape mirrored the Norse cosmos, with the ship as a vessel sailing through the 9 realms. At Oseberg in Norway, where archaeologists uncovered an intricately carved ship buried with 2 women, the grave goods included tapestries depicting ceremonial processions and wooden carts possibly used in rituals. This wasn't merely a display of wealth, it was a toolkit for navigating the afterlife, ensuring the deceased could guide the living from beyond. The placement of these mounds mattered profoundly, often situated near waterways or on ley lines, as if anchoring the site to invisible currents of spiritual energy. The timing of these rituals reveals even deeper layers. Norse sagas speak of burials coinciding with celestial events, solstices, eclipses, or the appearance of specific constellations like the aurora borealis, which some believed were the armor of the Valkyries. At Gamla Uppsala in Sweden, where 3 massive king's mounds still dominate the horizon, excavations revealed remnants of feasting and games lasting days. These weren't wakes in the modern sense. They were reenactments of the god Odin's mythical hall, where fallen warriors prepared for Ragnarök, the apocalyptic battle that would destroy the old world to make way for the new. By mirroring this myth, the living transformed their leader's death into a participatory act of cosmic recycling. Perhaps most striking is how these rituals blurred the line between endings and beginnings. The Sutton Hoo ship burial in England, though Anglo-Saxon, echoes this tradition, with its iconic helmet and gold purse suggesting the dead weren't just mourned but actively recruited as ancestral guardians. Norse poetry describes how the smoke from funeral pyres carried blessings to the gods, ensuring fertile harvests or victory in battle. When a king's mound was sealed, it wasn't a finale. It was a covenant, a promise that his presence would linger in the land's very soil, his wisdom whispering through the roots of oaks and the crash of waves. Standing before these mounds today, their contours softened by centuries of wind and rain, you can almost hear the echoes of horn blasts and chanting. The Vikings didn't see death as a full stop. It was a semicolon in the saga of their people, a punctuation mark that tied one chapter's closing to the next opening line. In the flicker of a funeral torch, they glimpsed eternity. The great Zimbabwe rises from the African savanna like a stone crown, its dry stone walls curving with such precision that not even a blade of grass could slip between the rocks. This wasn't just a city, it was a stage for the sacred theater of power, where the end of one ruler's era and the beginning of another wasn't merely announced but ritually conjured. The hill complex, perched atop a granite outcrop, holds the clues: narrow, winding passages leading to secluded chambers, their walls blackened by centuries of sacred fires. Here, in these hidden spaces, archaeologists believe the fate of kingdoms was decided not through brute force alone, but through ceremonies that bridged the living and the ancestral dead. Walk through the ruins today, and you can still feel the weight of those moments. The soapstone birds found atop monoliths weren't just decorations. They were mediators, their outstretched wings carrying messages between earthly rulers and the spirit world. When a new king ascended, the rituals performed here transformed raw political power into divine mandate. the people didn't just accept a new leader, they witnessed his spiritual anointing as priests channeled the voices of long-gone monarchs to bless the transition. The conical tower at the heart of the great enclosure, its solid form mirroring the grain bins that fed the kingdom, stood as both symbol and safeguard, a promise that the new era would bring prosperity, not chaos. But the true genius of great Zimbabwe's rituals lay in their physicality. The act of building, of fitting stone upon stone without mortar, was itself a metaphor for societal cohesion. Just as each rock relied on its neighbor to hold the wall upright, so too did the kingdom depend on the interplay between rulers, ancestors, and the land. The end of an era wasn't marked by destruction, but by reconfiguration. Old altars were dismantled and rebuilt, pathways realigned to reflect new celestial patterns. Even the gold traded through these halls played a role not just as currency, but as spiritual offering, its gleam considered a tangible fragment of the sun's favor. Recent excavations reveal something even more profound. Beneath the floors of the eastern enclosure, archaeologists found traces of cattle bones arranged in deliberate patterns. In Shona tradition, cattle are more than wealth. They're living bridges to the ancestors. Their ritual slaughter during times of transition wasn't sacrifice in the traditional sense, it was communion, a shared meal between the living and the dead to seal the covenant of continuity. The soapstone bird carvings, with their human-like features, suggest these ceremonies weren't one-way petitions. They were conversations where the wisdom of the past actively shaped the future. Standing in the shadow of the hill complex at dusk, as the wind hums through the ancient walls, you can almost hear the echoes of drumbeats and chanting. The stones don't just tell of kings and kingdoms, they whisper of a civilization that understood the most profound truth of all. That power to endure must be rooted in something deeper than force. It must be woven into the very fabric of time, sanctified by those who came before, and entrusted to those ready to build anew. The Cahokia Mounds rise from the Illinois floodplain like earthen waves frozen in time, a sprawling complex of over 120 mounds that once formed the beating heart of ancient North America. At its center looms Monk's Mound, a colossal earthen pyramid covering 14 acres and rising 100 feet high, its 4 terraces stacked like layers of sacred meaning. Climb its summit today, and you're standing atop what may have been the greatest stage for ritual in pre-Columbian America, where solstice sunrises painted the horizon in gold, and the transfer of power between leaders became a cosmic event. What's staggering about Cahokia isn't just its scale, supporting a population rivaling medieval London at its peak, but how every feature of this landscape was engineered for ceremony. The Grand Plaza, stretching 50 acres at Monk's Mound's base, could have held tens of thousands for gatherings where the rhythm of rattles and drums synchronized with the movements of the heavens. Archaeologists have found evidence of wood henges, circular arrangements of red cedar posts that functioned as solar calendars. During equinoxes, the rising sun would align perfectly with key posts, casting long shadows that pointed toward ceremonial structures like divine arrows. This wasn't just a city, it was a celestial instrument, its people attuned to the universe's heartbeat. Then there are the mystery mounds like Mound 72, where excavations revealed a gruesome yet reverent tableau. Buried beneath its layers lay the remains of a man atop 20,000 shell beads, surrounded by sacrificial victims arranged in symbolic patterns, some with their hands bound, others laid out like celestial markers. Nearby, pits held the bones of young women, their deaths possibly timed to coincide with agricultural cycles. While unsettling to modern sensibilities, these finds suggest Cahokia's people saw ritual sacrifice not as violence, but as sacred reciprocity, a necessary exchange to maintain balance between the human and spirit worlds. The most haunting question isn't how Cahokia thrived, but why it was abandoned. Around the 13th century, this bustling metropolis emptied, its mounds left to the elements. Unlike conquests or natural disasters that leave clear scars, Cahokia's decline feels deliberate, almost ceremonial. Recent discoveries hint at a possible closing ritual, carefully placed layers of pure clay sealing off sacred spaces, like putting the earth itself to bed. Some theorize that a final procession circled the mounds, scattering symbolic offerings before the people dispersed. Others point to evidence of controlled burnings, not of destruction, but of purification, as if the city's caretakers were systematically releasing its spiritual energy back to the cosmos. What lingers most isn't the mystery of their departure, but the legacy of their belief. Cahokia's mounds weren't just monuments, they were living contracts between earth and sky. When the last priest descended Monk's Mound for the final time, they likely carried not despair, but conviction that some endings must be honored with the same reverence as beginnings. Today, as the first light of winter solstice grazes the mound's frost-covered slopes, you can almost hear the echo of that faith, that even in letting go, they ensured the world would keep turning. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro glimmers under the Indus Valley sun, its brick-lined basin so precisely constructed that not a drop of water seeps through even after 4,000 years. Unlike the blood-soaked altars of Mesopotamia or the celestial pyramids of Egypt, this space whispers of a different kind of sacredness, one rooted in quietude and flow. Step into its surrounding colonnades, and you can almost hear the echoes of bare feet on baked brick, the soft lapping of water against steps where generations came not to beg the gods for mercy, but to meet them in stillness. Those mysterious soapstone seals found throughout the Indus cities, carved with unicorn-like creatures and undeciphered script, hint at rituals we can only piece together through fragments. A seal depicting a figure seated cross-legged in meditation, surrounded by animals, suggests ceremonies where humanity sought harmony with nature rather than dominance over it. The countless clay figurines of women with elaborate headdresses might represent priestesses or earth goddesses, their presence in household shrines pointing to domestic rituals that wove the sacred into daily life. Even the city's meticulous grid layout, with its advanced drainage systems, reflects a worldview where physical and spiritual purity flowed together like the waters of the bath itself. What's haunting is how this civilization chose to say goodbye, while others marked their endings with apocalyptic fires or inscribed curses. The people of the Indus Valley simply walked away. The baths weren't shattered by invaders but slowly silted over. The seals weren't smashed but left in neat piles, as if awaiting hands that would never return. Recent studies of river sediments suggest climate shifts may have dispersed their cities, but the absence of weapon-strewn ruins speaks volumes. Their departure feels deliberate, not a defeat, but a release, like water evaporating back into the sky. Perhaps the most poignant clue lies in what they didn't build. No grand tombs, no temples shouting to the heavens, just that silent bath, its waters reflecting the same stars we see today. In a world obsessed with leaving marks, the Indus people seem to have mastered the most elusive ritual of all, the art of letting go without a sound. The Roman triumph wasn't just a parade, it was a meticulously choreographed rebirth of the city itself. Picture the scene: a victorious general, his face painted red like Jupiter's statue, standing in a gilded chariot drawn by 4 white stallions. Behind him, legions marched in perfect formation, their armor polished to blinding brilliance, while prisoners in chains shuffled past jeering crowds. The air smelled of incense and crushed laurel leaves, the streets slick with wine poured in celebration. But this spectacle wasn't merely about boasting over defeated enemies. It was Rome's way of digesting conquest, transforming raw violence into sacred theater. At the heart of the ritual lay a profound paradox. The triumphant general, though hailed as imperator, wore a slave's tunic beneath his purple robes, a whispered reminder that even the mightiest were mortal. A public slave stood behind him, murmuring, "Respice post te, hominum te memento." Look behind you, remember you are but a man. This wasn't modesty, it was alchemy. By temporarily elevating a leader to near divinity, then ritually humbling him, Rome reforged the chaos of war into the stability of order. The spoils displayed chests of gold, exotic animals, even uprooted trees from conquered lands weren't just loot. They were fragments of the outside world being absorbed into Rome's eternal story. The procession's route mapped this transformation onto the city itself. Starting beyond the sacred pomerium, the boundary separating military from civilian space, the general entered as both conqueror and supplicant. At the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, he offered the enemy's standards and his laurel wreath, symbolically returning his borrowed divinity. Meanwhile, the fate of prisoners underscored Rome's brutal pragmatism. Some were executed in the Tullianum dungeon, their deaths closing the chapter of war, while others, like Vercingetorix, kept alive for 6 years before his strangulation, served as living trophies of delayed closure. What's often overlooked is how these triumphs functioned as cosmic resets. The ceremony coincided with the lustrum, a purification ritual held every 5 years, tying military victory to the renewal of civic bonds. When Pompey celebrated his third triumph in 61 BC, he didn't just parade captured pirates and Mithridate's throne. He inaugurated Rome's first stone theater, a monument to culture rising from conquest's ashes. Even the graffiti scratched onto triumphal arches reveals this duality. Beside boasts of espicuar, anonymous hands wrote prayers for fallen sons, a reminder that every new beginning grew from endings. Yet the triumph's greatest power lay in its flexibility. After Actium, Augustus transformed the ritual into imperial theater, using it to cement his Pax Romana. Later emperors like Titus staged triumphs for victories over rebels rather than foreign foes, twisting the ritual's meaning while preserving its form. By the time Constantinople's emperors replaced chariots with golden thrones carried by senators, the triumph had become a ghost of itself, but still pulsed with that original promise that Rome could endlessly reinvent itself through ceremony. Standing in the Forum today, where the basalt paving stones still bear the grooves of triumphal chariots, you're not just walking through ruins, you're tracing the grooves of a civilization that turned the terror of endings into the art of renewal, one procession at a time. The Easter Island Moai stare out across the Pacific with hollow eyes, their massive forms carved from volcanic tuff, as if the island itself gave birth to gods. These weren't just statues, they were living vessels, believed to channel mana, the sacred energy that flowed through ancestors into the present. Each Moai's back faces the sea, its gaze turned inward toward the villagers, as if to say, "We are the wall between you and oblivion." But the most haunting thing about these stone giants isn't their size or their numbers, it's the story their fallen bodies tell. Walk the slopes of Rono Roroku today, and you'll find nearly 400 Moai in every stage of creation and collapse. Some lie half-carved in the quarry, their features still emerging from the rock like ghosts refusing to be born. Others stand buried up to their necks, victims of shifting soil or abandoned efforts. Then there are the ones that made it, transported miles across the island to ceremonial platforms called ahu, where they once stood sentinel over their descendants. The engineering behind this feat still baffles scholars. How did a people without wheels or draft animals move these multi-ton monoliths? Oral traditions speak of the statues, walking with ropes and coordinated pulls, a rhythmic dance of human and stone that transformed transport into ritual. But the Moai's fall reveals even more than their rise. By the 17th century, nearly all had been toppled, many deliberately broken at the neck. For decades, this was seen as proof of Rapa Nui's collapse, a cautionary tale of ecological ruin. Yet newer research paints a subtler picture. The toppling may have been part of a ceremonial unmaking, a way to release ancestral mana during times of crisis. When crops failed and clans warred over dwindling resources, the act of felling a rival's moai wasn't just vandalism, it was spiritual disarmament. The last standing moai, erected around 1600, watched over an island in transition, where old gods were giving way to new traditions like the Birdman cult. Even in their silence, these statues speak volumes. The Ahu platforms weren't passive displays, they were stages for cyclical renewal. During festivals, islanders painted the moai's eyes with coral and obsidian, awakening them to witness dances and offerings. Their hollow sockets once held the island's collective memory, until the day came when no one remembered how to carve new ones. Now, their tilted forms lie like fallen clock hands, marking the moment an island's heartbeat slowed but never fully stopped. High on the wind-swept plateaus of Tibet, where the air thins and the horizon stretches endlessly, the dead do not return to the earth, they take flight. Sky burials, known as Baya Ji Tor, transform death into an act of radical generosity, where the human body becomes an offering to vultures, the Dakini or sky dancers of Buddhist tradition. These rituals unfold on remote mountaintops, stone platforms worn smooth by centuries of practice, where the boundary between life and afterlife feels as thin as the Himalayan air. The ceremony begins before dawn. A Rogyapa or body breaker prepares the deceased with precise cuts, following traditions passed down through generations. There's no morbidity here, only pragmatism and reverence. In a land where the frozen ground resists digging and wood is too scarce for cremation, this practice aligns with nature's economy. But the deeper meaning is etched into Tibetan Buddhist philosophy. The body, empty of consciousness, is merely a vessel. By offering it to scavengers, the deceased performs one final act of compassion, sustaining other beings in a cycle where nothing is wasted. As the first vultures circle, their wings casting shadows over the rocks, the ritual takes on an almost cinematic grandeur. The birds descend not as chaotic scavengers, but as honored guests, their feast sanctified by monks chanting prayers for the departed. To outsiders, it may seem jarring, but for Tibetans, this is liberation, a physical manifestation of the belief in anatta, or no self. The soul has already moved on. The body's dissolution is simply the last knot of attachment untied. The mountaintop itself is the ritual's silent architect. These spaces, often marked by prayer flags fluttering like rainbow bridges between earth and sky, are chosen for their exposure to the elements and their proximity to the heavens. Unlike the pyramids or ziggurates, which seek to defy time through stone, sky burials embrace transience. The platform is left bare, cleansed by wind and rain after each ceremony, ready for the next cycle of offering. Even the tools used, the knives, the mallets, are never taken home, lest death's energy disrupt the living. What's most striking is how the ritual mirrors Tibet's own history. In a land where political upheavals have rewritten eras, where monasteries have risen and fallen, the sky burial grounds remain constant. They are not monuments to endurance, but to acceptance, a reminder that all things, whether empires or individual lives, are part of a vast, ever-turning wheel. When the last vulture lifts into the blue, carrying fragments of flesh skyward, it's not an ending captured in stone, but a release written on the wind. The Templo Maya loomed over Tenochtitlan like a stone hymn to impermanence. Its twin temples to Huit, Tsilhotpotli, and Tlaloc, not just places of worship, but cosmic life support for a universe perpetually on the brink of collapse. Every drop of blood spilled on its steps wasn't mere violence, it was fuel. The Aztecs believed they lived in the fifth sun, the latest in a series of eras, each destroyed by cataclysm, jaguars, hurricanes, fire rains, and only through human sacrifice could this world avoid the same fate. The temple's very architecture embodied this dread. Its 4 ascending platforms represented the previous 4 suns, while the current era teetered precariously atop them, sustained by ritual. Climb those steps during a festival like Panquetzalistli, and you'd witness ceremonies so precise they blurred the line between theater and theology. Captive warriors, painted with chalk and adorned in feathers, ascended willingly, many believing their sacrifice would deliver them to the gods' celestial army. The act itself was swift, a flint knife across the chest, the heart lifted still beating to the sun, the body tumbling down the pyramid side, but the symbolism ran deeper. Blood wasn't just offered, it was invested, like paying interest on a cosmic debt. The temple stones, stained crimson from decades of ceremonies, became literal repositories of this sacred currency. The new fire ceremony, held every 52 years at the end of a calendar cycle, was the ultimate reckoning. As the Pleiades reached their zenith, priests extinguished every flame in the empire. In the temple's courtyard, a captive's chest was opened, and a new fire kindled in his wound. If the flames caught, the crowd erupted, the universe had granted another cycle. If they failed, darkness, chaos, the end of all things. Torches lit from this fire were then carried by runners to every corner of the realm, a network of light rekindling civilization itself. Archaeology reveals how the temple physically enacted this cycle of renewal. Each successive layer built over the last wasn't just expansion, it was reincarnation. Excavations uncovered caches of jade masks, coral, and even sacrificial children buried beneath new construction offerings to feed the next iteration. The temple's alignment amplified this. Its stairways framed the sunrise on equinoxes, turning the building into a sundial that marked not just hours but epochs. What's chilling isn't the violence but the tenderness beneath it. The Aztecs didn't revel in death, they trembled at responsibility. Their poetry speaks of life as a dream that could vanish at any moment, making every ritual an act of collective courage. When Cortés' men toppled the Templo Maya, they didn't just destroy a building, they shattered a covenant. Yet even in ruins, the stones whisper their warning, that every era survives only by what its people are willing to give up. The stones of the Western Wall in Jerusalem bear the weight of 20 centuries, not just as physical remnants of the Second Temple, but as living parchment where generations have pressed their prayers into the cracks. When Roman legions razed the temple in 70 AD, reducing its gilded halls to smoldering rubble, they didn't just destroy a building, they shattered the very axis around which Jewish spiritual life revolved. For centuries, the temple had been the pulse of divine connection, where the smoke of sacrifices curled skyward like a continuous conversation with the divine. Its loss could have been a death knell. Instead, it became a crucible forging a radical transformation, from centralized sacrifice to decentralized prayer, from priestly rituals to personal devotion. Walk along the Western Wall today, and you're stepping into a paradox, a space both of profound grief and unyielding hope. The wall itself is a structural accident, never meant to be sacred. It was merely a retaining block supporting the Temple Mount's expansion. Yet in its survival, it became a metaphor. Even when the center collapses, the edges hold. Here, the rhythms of Jewish life adapted. Without the altar, the home became a sanctuary. Without the priesthood, every table became an altar. The synagogue emerged as a miniature temple, its ark facing Jerusalem, its liturgy echoing the lost sacrificial rites. Mourning turned into memory, and memory into a bridge across time. The most poignant ritual here is the tearing of garments kriya, a practice once reserved for personal bereavement, now performed by some at their first glimpse of the wall. It's a visceral acknowledgement. The temple's destruction isn't ancient history, but an open wound. Yet in the same breath, notes tucked between the stones carry petitions for weddings, healings, and peace. This duality defines Judaism's response to epochal endings. Grieve what was lost, but plant seeds for what might grow. The annual fast of Tisha B'Av, when Jews sit on the floor chanting lamentations, isn't just a dirge for the past. It's a rehearsal for a future where, as tradition whispers, the day of destruction will become a day of joy. Archaeology whispers secrets beneath the surface. Recent excavations revealed original temple paving stones scarred by Roman battering rams, their fractures mirroring the brokenness of exile. But dig deeper, and you'll find something astonishing. Beneath the wall's foundations, a sewer tunnel from the temple's last days still intact. Inside, a silver coin minted by rebels during the siege, and a stone weight inscribed, "For the son of Catros," likely a priestly family. These artifacts aren't just relics, they're tactile proof that even in collapse, continuity persists. The priestly lineages survived in scribes and scholars, the sacrificial calendar in liturgical poetry, the temple's spatial holiness in the concept of Mikdash Mat, the sanctuary in miniature, found in every Jewish home. What unfolds at the Western Wall every day is more than ritual, it's a dialogue with time itself. Soldiers in uniform press their foreheads to the stone beside Holocaust survivors. Tourists from every continent sway with psalms their ancestors carried across oceans. The wall doesn't just memorialize an ending, it embodies a truth written into Judaism's DNA. That resilience isn't about rebuilding the past, but reimagining its essence. When a 13-year-old boy reads from the Torah here at his bar mitzvah, his voice joins a chorus stretching back to the priests who once stood steps above him. The temple's destruction didn't end a story. It forced a question: how do you keep a flame alive when the hearth is gone? The answer is etched into every note wedged between these stones, not in ink, but in hope. Beneath the bustling streets of Rome, winding tunnels stretch for miles like veins of faith running through the city's underbelly. The catacombs were more than graves. They were the hidden womb of Christianity, where a persecuted people carved out spaces to mourn, to hope, and to defy death itself. In these dim corridors, lit only by flickering oil lamps, early Christians didn't just bury their dead. They enacted a quiet revolution, painting their defiance on the walls in scenes of Jonah emerging from the whale, Lazarus rising from his tomb, and the Good Shepherd cradling his flock. Each fresco was a manifesto in pigment, whispering that the empire's brutality couldn't stamp out the promise of resurrection. The catacombs' design reveals a profound duality. On the surface, they appeared as simple burial niches, unremarkable to Roman authorities who saw them as just another necropolis. But look closer, and the symbolism ignites. The fish carved into marble slabs wasn't just decoration. It was a covert creed, an acronym for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior in Greek. The chambers where families gathered to share meals with their departed weren't mere memorials. They were underground reenactments of the Last Supper, a defiant celebration of communion in the shadow of persecution. Even the labyrinthine layout served a purpose. These tunnels were spiritual hideouts where the faithful could vanish from imperial eyes, turning grief into guerrilla worship. What's striking is how these spaces transformed fear into ritual. When a martyr was interred, their body often smuggled in under cover of darkness. The catacombs became theaters of sacred memory. Pilgrims would touch cloths to the martyr's remains, creating brandia, relics that carried the echo of holy courage. The tunnels themselves functioned as a liturgical calendar, with specific chambers reserved for baptisms during Easter vigils, their walls echoing with the whispers of new converts being washed clean of their past lives. In a world where Christianity was punishable by death, these acts weren't just devotion, they were treason written in candle smoke and whispered psalms. The most poignant frescoes are those of the Orontes figures with arms outstretched in prayer, their eyes lifted toward an unseen light. These weren't portraits of despair, but of expectancy. Early Christians believed the catacombs were a temporary holding place, a way station where souls awaited the final resurrection. When they painted biblical scenes alongside pagan motifs like peacocks symbolizing immortality in Roman art, they weren't compromising, they were claiming. Every brushstroke declared that even Roman symbols could be baptized into new meaning, just as their own suffering would one day be transformed. Today, tracing a finger along the soot-blackened ceiling of the catacombs of Priscilla, you can still see where countless hands once reached up to touch the stone, leaving behind traces of oil and hope. The air smells of damp earth and centuries, but also of something subtler, the stubborn persistence of a faith that refused to let death have the last word. These tunnels weren't just a refuge for the dead, they were the cradle of a creed that would outlive an empire, proving that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin not with a shout, but with a whisper in the dark. The Kaaba rises from the heart of Mecca's Grand Mosque like a lodestone for the soul, a stark, black-draped cube that has drawn pilgrims into its orbit for over a millennium. But this isn't just a building, it's a living paradox, a structure that embodies both the unshakable and the ever-changing. According to Islamic tradition, the Kaaba has been destroyed and rebuilt a dozen times, from its legendary origins by Abraham and Ishmael to its reconstruction by the Prophet Muhammad after the Battle of the Trench. Each iteration wasn't just a physical renewal, it was a spiritual recalibration, a way for the faithful to reaffirm their covenant with the divine. The very act of rebuilding became a metaphor that faith, like the Kaaba itself, could weather collapse and emerge anew. During Hajj, the annual pilgrimage that draws millions, the Kaaba transforms into the axis of a sacred choreography. Circling the structure 7 times in the Tawaf, pilgrims trace a path that mirrors the celestial motion of angels around God's throne, as described in Islamic cosmology. The rhythm of their footsteps counterclockwise, like the rotation of the universe itself, turns the ritual into a cosmic clock, with each circuit marking the passage of time, even as it loops back to the beginning. The Tawaf isn't just a walk, it's a reenactment of eternity, where the end of one circle is indistinguishable from the start of the next. What's often overlooked is how the Kaaba's physicality reinforces this duality. The black stone embedded in its corner, kissed or touched by pilgrims, is said to have descended from paradise as a white jewel, darkened by humanity's sins. Yet it remains a tangible link between heaven and earth, a symbol that even in a world of decay, divine connection endures. The kiswa, the embroidered black cloth draped over the Kaaba, is replaced annually in a ceremony that mirrors the cyclical renewal of the Hajj itself. The old kiswa isn't discarded, its fragments are preserved as relics, weaving the past into the fabric of the present. The rituals surrounding the Kaaba also confront the tension between unity and impermanence. During Hajj, pilgrims dress in identical white ihram garments, stripping away markers of status or nationality. For a few days, the world's most diverse gathering moves as one body, a fleeting glimpse of timeless harmony. But the climax of Hajj, the symbolic stoning of the devil at Mina, acknowledges the inevitability of rupture. By casting pebbles at 3 pillars, pilgrims reenact Abraham's rejection of temptation, a reminder that renewal requires confrontation. Beneath the Kaaba's solemnity lies a quieter truth, its vulnerability. Historical accounts describe floods sweeping through the mosque, requiring repairs. There were moments when the structure stood nearly empty, like during the brief reign of the Sarmatians, who stole the black stone for 2 decades. Yet each crisis became an opportunity for revival. When the stone was returned, it was said to have been broken, a physical reminder that even the most sacred objects bear scars, and that wholeness isn't the absence of damage, but the will to endure it. Standing in the shadow of the Kaaba today, you're not just witnessing a monument, you're seeing a testament to the resilience of meaning, a cube that has survived conquests, fires, and time itself, not by remaining unchanged, but by embracing the sacred cycle of falling and rising. In its stillness, it whispers the same lesson etched into the footsteps of every pilgrim, that endings are just beginnings in disguise, and that the most powerful act of faith isn't preservation but return. The towering dome of a Buddhist stupa rises against the sky like a frozen bubble of enlightenment, its whitewashed curves both monumental and weightless, as if holding its breath between earth and heaven. These aren't just shrines, they're 3-dimensional mandalas, their every layer a coded lesson in the nature of existence. At their heart often lies a relic, a fragment of bone, a tooth, or even a single hair of the Buddha, not as objects of worship, but as sparks to ignite contemplation. Like a pebble dropped into still water, these relics ripple outward through time, turning the stupa into a cosmic echo of the moment Siddhartha Gautama pierced the veil of illusion. Walk the circumambulation path around a stupa, and you're tracing the wheel of time itself. Each clockwise step mirrors the sun's journey across the sky, a deliberate unraveling of linear thought. The Tibetan tradition counts 108 circuits, a number sacred not just for its ties to mala beads, but because it fractures the illusion of permanence. With every revolution, the past's grip loosens, the future's weight lightens. The stupa's axis, piercing vertically through its dome, becomes the still point around which this dance of impermanence turns, a visual paradox of movement and stillness, change and eternity. The architecture whispers this duality. The square base represents steadfast earth, the circular dome, fluid cosmos, the 13 tiers of the spire. They're the ladder from samsara to nirvana, each step a dissolution of attachment. Even the harmika, the square railing at the spire's base, holds meaning. It's the threshold where the Buddha paused before choosing to teach, a reminder that wisdom must flow back into the world rather than hoard itself. When monsoons streak the stupa's whitewash or earthquakes crack its surface, these aren't flaws but teachings in plaster and stone, proof that even sacred forms must bow to time's teeth. Nowhere is this clearer than at Swayambhanath in Nepal, where the all-seeing eyes of the Buddha gaze from the stupa's golden pinnacle. They don't blink at the surrounding chaos of monkeys and market stalls, they simply witness. Below, pilgrims spin prayer wheels engraved with the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, each rotation a microcosm of the stupa's greater lesson, that endings are illusions. The mantra's 6 syllables correspond to the 6 realms of cyclic existence: hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, demigods, gods, yet the wheel's motion blends them into a single, seamless flow. The great stupa at Sanchai tells another chapter of this story. Built by Ashoka in the 3rd century BCE, its sandstone carvings depict not the Buddha's form, but his absence, a footprint here, an empty throne there. This artistic choice isn't negation, it's liberation. By refusing to freeze the enlightened one in stone, the stupa declares that awakening isn't a person but a pulse, one that can outlast empires. When invaders looted Sanchai's relics, they missed the point. The real treasure was the emptiness at the stupa's core, a silent thunderclap echoing Shunyata, the truth that form is inherently void. Modern stupas carry this legacy forward. In Ladak's Thixi Monastery, the Maitreya stupa stands unfinished, its upper levels wrapped in scaffolding like a chrysalis. It's a deliberate pause awaiting the future Buddha's era. Meanwhile, in Colorado's Rocky Mountains, the great stupa of Dharmakaya cradles the ashes of Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, a teacher who bridged Tibetan wisdom with Western minds. Its rainbow-colored tiles catch the alpine light, whispering that the wheel turns differently in each land, yet always toward the same dawn. At Budhanath in Kathmandu, pilgrims move like constellations around the stupa's massive dome, their murmurs blending with the clatter of rooftop prayer flags. Each flag's fade from crimson to pink, gold to pale yellow, is a lesson written in wind and dye. That dissolution isn't loss, but the price of bearing witness. As sunlight slips behind the Himalayas, butter lamps flicker to life in the stupa's alcoves. Their flames dance in the glass, not fighting the darkness but illuminating their own fragility. In this light, the stupa stops being a monument and becomes a mirror reflecting back the truth that every ending we fear is already turning, like the wheel, toward beginnings we can't yet imagine. The forests of Ai's Jingu breathe with a rhythm older than empires. Every 20 years, like clockwork, the towering cypress pillars of Japan's most sacred Shinto shrine are carefully dismantled, and an exact replica rises beside it, not as replacement but as reincarnation. This ritual, known as Shikinen Sengu, isn't about preservation in the Western sense. It's a living dialogue with time itself, where decay isn't failure but the necessary exhale before renewal. The old shrine isn't mourned, it's celebrated, its retired timbers distributed to lesser shrines across Japan, infusing them with fragments of the divine. At the heart of this practice lies Shinto's core truth, that kami, the spirits dwelling in rivers, trees, and stones, are as cyclical as the seasons. The shrine's architecture mirrors this philosophy. Its unpainted hinoki wood weathers to silver, then is reborn golden. The thatched roof, thick as a dragon's hide, is rewoven strand by strand. Even the treasures within mirrors, swords, and jeweled ornaments are meticulously recreated, their forms unchanged but their substance made new. This isn't replication, it's resurrection, a belief made manifest that nothing truly ends if its essence remains unbroken. The ceremony's most profound moment comes when the sacred mirror, embodiment of Amaterasu, the sun goddess, is carried from the old shrine to the new at midnight. Priests in white robes move like ghosts through torchlight, their footsteps silent on the gravel path. The mirror never sees daylight, just as the sun goddess once hid in a cave, plunging the world into darkness until laughter and dance lured her back. This ritual reenacts the eternal return of light. The new shrine isn't consecrated, it's awakened, as if the kami themselves simply shift their gaze to the fresh structure, continuing a conversation paused only briefly. What's astonishing is how this practice threads together opposites. The shrine's design, based on ancient rice granaries, ties renewal to sustenance, both physical and spiritual. The rebuilding employs techniques unchanged for 1,300 years, yet the tools are modern. Master carvers use chisels forged by the same families for generations, but their blueprints are now digitized. This harmony of old and new reflects Shinto's adaptability. The shrines may look eternally ancient, but their survival depends on embracing change. Beyond eyes, smaller shrines enact their own microcosms of this cycle. At Shimagomo's shrine in Kyoto, the Mitarashi festival invites worshippers to wade through a purifying stream, their feet churning the water's surface like the turning of eras. In Tokyo's Meiji Jingu, visitors write wishes on wooden ema plaques which are burned annually, not as destruction, but as release, the smoke carrying hopes to the kami. These rituals share a common pulse, that endings aren't full stops but commas in an endless sentence written by both gods and mortals. The latest Shikainen Sengu, completed in 2013, faced unprecedented challenges. Sacred hinoki trees were harder to source due to deforestation. Artisans skilled in ancient joinery techniques dwindled, yet the ceremony adapted without compromising its sole proof that tradition isn't a cage, but a riverbed, channeling the same waters through changing landscapes. When the old shrine's gates finally closed, they didn't mark an ending. They were a hinge, swinging open to the next 20-year chapter in a story that began when the first shrine was built in 4 BCE, and will continue as long as there are hands to rebuild it and hearts to believe. We stand at the edge of an uncharted era where glaciers retreat into memory, algorithms reshape human connection, and invisible viruses rewrite the rules of society. Yet, unlike the civilizations we've explored, our modern world lacks the sacred architecture of transition. No stone circles mark the end of the age of fossil fuels. No pyramids rise to commemorate the digital revolution's casualties. We face existential shifts with spreadsheets and hashtags instead of ritual fires and processional dances. The Aztecs had their new fire ceremony, the Norse their ship burials. What do we have? Consider the climate crisis, a slow-motion collapse that demands collective mourning and renewal. Indigenous communities from the Arctic to the Amazon still practice land-based rituals, offering tobacco to thawing permafrost or singing to endangered species. Meanwhile, industrialized nations default to sterile conferences and non-binding accords. When Greta Thunberg led school strikes, she instinctively reached for something ancient, the solitary vigil, the handmade sign like a pilgrim's staff. Her Fridays for Future movement became an accidental ritual, not in a temple but in the streets. Pandemics, too, reveal our ritual poverty. The Black Death birthed Europe's dance macabre art, reminding all of death's democracy. COVID-19 gave us Zoom funerals and elbow bumps. Some communities improvised Italians singing from balconies, New Yorkers applauding healthcare workers at sunset, but these were fleeting. No permanent spaces emerged to process millions of losses. Compare this to Japan's tsunami stones, centuries-old markers warning future generations where not to build. Our memorials are digital and decentralized, a sea of profile picture ribbons that vanish with the next news cycle. Technology's relentless march offers another paradox. We document every meal and milestone yet struggle to mark true transitions. The launch of ChatGPT garnered more headlines than the Industrial Revolution, yet its societal baptism was a chaotic free-for-all. Where are the ceremonies to navigate AI's ethical thresholds? Silicon Valley's closest analog, the product launch, is a poor substitute for rites of passage, celebrating disruption without honoring what's displaced. Yet glimmers of new ritual emerge. Burning Man's temporary city in the Nevada desert, with its temple burns and participatory art, shows how modern crowds hunger for collective catharsis. The global women's marches wove protest with ritual, their sea of pink pussy hats forming a visual mantra. Even virtual spaces spawn ceremony, Minecraft servers hosting digital vigils, Discord channels lighting pixel candles for lost online friends. Perhaps our challenge isn't creating rituals but recognizing them. The climate activist chaining herself to a pipeline engages in symbolic theater as potent as any Aztec sacrifice. A Reddit thread memorializing a departed user functions like a virtual stupa, a repository of communal grief. The difference lies in intentionality. Ancient cultures built rituals to last millennia. Ours often emerge by accident and fade with the trend cycle. The lesson from Göbekli Tepe to Ais Jingu is clear. Civilizations that navigate transition best are those that carve space physically and psychologically, to honor endings before rushing to beginnings. Our ancestors knew upheaval required more than policy changes. It demanded mythic framing. As our own world trembles, we must ask, where are our processional avenues, our communal pyres, our stones inscribed with warnings for the seventh generation? The rituals we lack aren't relics of superstition. They're the missing tools for navigating change without losing our humanity. From Stonehenge to the Kaaba, humanity's ritual spaces stand as silent witnesses to our most profound truth. That time doesn't just pass, it transforms. These ancient sites were never merely backdrops for ceremony. They were living dialogues with eternity, where civilizations turned their greatest fears of collapse, of oblivion, of cosmic indifference, into acts of breathtaking creativity. The Mayans encoded celestial mathematics into pyramid steps. The Norse launched their dead into the sea aboard ships of flame. The builders of Göbekli Tepe buried their sacred circles like time capsules, ensuring their prayers would outlast the very language they spoke. What unites these traditions isn't superstition, but something far more radical: the refusal to accept change as chaos. When the Aztecs performed their new fire ceremony, they didn't just reset their calendar, they re-enchanted the universe, convincing an entire empire that the sun would rise again. At Ais Jingu, the act of rebuilding the shrine every 20 years became a physical mantra. Nothing is permanent, yet nothing is ever truly lost. These cultures understood what we've forgotten, that rituals aren't escapes from reality, but tools for shaping it. Our modern world faces transitions just as monumental: climate shifts, technological revolutions, the redefinition of what it means to be human. Yet we confront them with data streams and policy papers, as if reason alone could soothe the soul. The climate activist chaining herself to a pipeline isn't just protesting. She's performing a ritual of desperation, grasping for a language of sacrifice we've largely discarded. The silent vigils for pandemic victims, the makeshift memorials of flowers and photos, these are our instinctive reach for ceremony, raw and unformed but pulsing with the same need that raised the pyramids. The challenge isn't to imitate the past, but to rediscover its wisdom. Sacred spaces don't require stone or gold, they require intention. A Finnish community planting a forest to offset their carbon footprint is performing a ritual as potent as any solstice alignment. The digital artist who coded an AI to recite extinct languages is building a virtual ziggurat for lost voices. Even the humble act of turning off our screens to watch the sunset becomes a miniature Stonehenge, anchoring us to rhythms older than Wi-Fi. Future civilizations may not sift through our ruins for temples, but they'll study our server farms and climate strikes, our hashtags and quiet acts of resilience. They'll ask whether we faced our transitions with denial or dignity, whether we left behind not just footprints but signposts. The lesson of the ritual spaces we've explored isn't about recreating their forms, but embracing their purpose, to mark our passages with meaning, to turn our collective anxiety into collective art. Time hasn't stopped flowing. The question is whether we'll learn to build bridges across its currents, or let them carry us away in silence.